Bernard Kerik, of course, has been in the public eye for decades. He joined the NYPD back in 1986 and had a meteoric rise all the way to commissioner just 14 years later. He was on the national radar. President Bush appointed him to run the Iraqi Provisional Government's police and intel operations. Soon after that, in 2004, the president nominated Kerik for Secretary of Homeland Security. But that's when things began to unravel. A week later, he withdrew his own nomination after admitting that he had tax problems. And that whole episode strained Kerik's relationship with Rudy Giuliani. The mayor made Kerik his police commissioner, and Rudy was a major booster for his bid to become Homeland Security Secretary. But after his legal troubles began, Kerik said Giuliani picked up and ran. Kerik dedicates an entire chapter in From Jailer to Jailed to their falling out. It is called Losing Rudy, and here's an excerpt of it. It has been sad, and disappointing to me, the way that he cut off our relationship, because that doesn't seem like the man I knew professionally or personally. And in the book, Bernie also explains how Giuliani abandoned he and his family after he went to prison. Kerik served 3 years for tax evasion and lying to White House officials. And here's another excerpt from that book. There is one thing that still bothers me. During my time in Cumberland, Rudy never once called to speak with my girls. My safe guess is that as a former U.S. attorney, Rudy had a sense of what the separation of incarceration does to families, yet not once did he call in any way. I want to talk about some of the reform ideas you have, but speak about the relationship with the man who obviously helped your escalation to prominence, like we talked about, obviously spoke out on your behalf for the Homeland Secretary bid. Were you really surprised that, given how volatile or how hot you were at the time, that the mayor didn't distance himself from you?
No, at the time, our separation was pretty much agreed upon by him and I. And I had no problem with it. I understood it. That wasn't that's not where the disappointment come in. He is the godfather to my two youngest daughters, who are now 12 and 15. When this was going on, they were 6 and 9. When I went away, I would have hoped that he reached out to my wife, to the girls, check on them, see how they were doing. And he didn't do that, and that was disappointing. None of that takes away from my respect and admiration for what he did for the city, my thanks for what he did for me personally. And what he did for this country on and in the aftermath of 9/11. I have an enormous amount of respect for him. But, things happen, and, now I could look after my girls on my own, and things are okay.
If he was sitting at this table and we asked him, Rudy, did Bernie ever lie to you through all the height of this, when there was the questions about bona fides for the position, how would he answer?
I don't think he could answer. We never had those conversations. It wasn't like, he sat back and said, did you do this? Did you pay your tax on your nanny or anything like that? We never got into that stuff.
And no other way to say this. Do you feel, knowing what you know now, that Rudy Giuliani is a hypocrite, a phony?
No, I don't think so. You know what? Here's what I think. I think politics is a dirty business. I think politicians, some, when stuff gets hot, they completely just, they turn the other way. That being said, not every politician is like that. You guys all know Peter King. At the time, he was the Homeland Security chairman of the House Committee for Homeland Security. He actually came to prison every 3 or 4 months to see me, sat in a visit room with me and other inmates and families every 3 or 4 months for 3 years. That man came to prison 6 hours from New York City.
Bernie, you mentioned, or we mentioned in the setup, before you were commissioner, you were head of corrections.
Right.
Obviously, you know the way the system worked, and we'll talk about the reforms in a second. What was the lowest moment when you went away where you said, my God, what am I doing here? I used to police these guys, and now I'm one of them.
I think the worst moment for me in this whole process was the morning I had to leave my kids. It wasn't, walking into the institution, it was bad. But there's nothing worse than walking out the door on my 2 daughters. That was the worst. And as I've tried to explain in the book, and I've said from time to time, prison is like dying with your eyes open. And that is close to the biggest reality I could, the way I could say it. You are placed in a stagnant position where your entire life, everything in your life goes on without you in it. And the worst part of that is that your kids, that includes your kids, so they grow, their heartaches, their disappointments, their schools, their plays, their sporting events. You have deaths in your family, you have births in your family, everything and anything goes on without you in it, and it is like dying while you get to watch.
If anybody had a, well, think would have a pretty good idea of what happened behind prisons, who were there, you spent your professional career enforcing the law, sending bad guys there. You knew, certainly as head of corrections, what those facilities were and what they were about. But so much of the book talks about how much of an eye-opener it was when you went in there as to who was there, for what, and what happened to them. What was the biggest shocks to you once you went from jailer to inmate?
You know what? I put a lot of people in prison. Bad people that did bad things, people that tried to kill me, people I seized tons of cocaine from, millions in drug proceeds, people that killed cops. And then I went to prison and I met these young kids sentenced to 10 and 15 years for first-time nonviolent drug offenses. I met those commercial fishermen that caught too many fish. I met a whole number of men that were good men that made mistakes. They weren't bad guys. These weren't bad people. They made mistakes, some of them out of stupidity, some of them out of greed, but they weren't people that we would consider, that you would consider, this guy's a convict, this guy's a bad guy, this guy's a menace to society. That's not them. That's not the men I was with. Many of them were like that. And I found it astonishing that we are putting all these people, there are 28,000 men right now in minimum security camps in the federal prison system around this country that could be on home confinement, work release, taking care of their families, taking care of the kids, paying taxes. I'm not saying you can't hold them accountable. You can hold them accountable, but don't disrupt and destroy their lives and take them out of the workforce for eternity, because that's what happens. And that, the biggest thing that I focus on in the book, and I try to focus on, is that we are creating this permanent underclass of American citizen where you take someone out of the workforce for the rest of their life. If a kid's 19 years old, he gets locked up for 10 years for a drug offense, I don't care if he lives to be 120, and he's a model citizen for the rest of his life, he's still a convicted felon. 70 to 80% of his job prospects are diminished. He's going to be a diminished citizen forever, for eternity. And it's wrong. The punishment is supposed to fit the crime, and it does not.
Well, the book again, From Jailer to Jailed, Bernie Kerik, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. We'll be right back, everybody. Stay with us.